council meeting to order. We do recognize that we meet on the traditional territory of the Lhtako Dene Nation. Tonight we do have a special presentation, and I want to recognize that we've got some special guests with us tonight for that presentation. So with respect to the agenda, we have Councillor Goulet has sent regrets. Apparently he's running for another office or something, and they're all candidates tonight, so he isn't able to join us. The city staff report K1, there's a replacement report on your desk. It's just switching out an updated report. K3, the actual report that's noted as a late agenda item because staff and myself were working on this through until Friday night, and we did have a breakthrough on that, so that childcare report there. And then there's 2 letters on your desk there that would normally be in SIP, and if council members want to speak to either of those, we would accept that once we get to SIP at that time. So with that in mind, if I can have a motion to adopt the agenda, approve the agenda. Councillor Paul, so moved. Councillor Runge, second. All in favor? Any opposed? That motion has carried. And then with respect to the adoption of the regular council meeting minutes of September 6th, Councillor Elliott, Councillor Rudenberg, second. Any questions or comments about the minutes? All those in favor? Any opposed? Carried. Okay, tonight, and we have the school district superintendent, Dan Lowndes, is here tonight, and Director John Massier from the Cariboo Regional District, and we did invite some other guests because we do want to show a video tonight, and 2 of our special guests that we have in the room are our IT specialists who are going to try and make sure that the video runs well. So thanks for being here, gentlemen. This video, and I think if I could, either Lindsay or Amy, to speak to the context of what we were doing with the video productions, what kinds of videos we've produced, and how this particular video that we're going to show tonight for the first time publicly came to be. If you could spend just a few minutes giving us that context.
Yeah, sorry, I'm unprepared for this, but no, so the videos came about as part of the planning process for, from the waterfront development downtown precinct implementation, including the Riverwalk lighting from the Fraser footbridge to the hospital, and the footbridge, and this, this Indigenous cultural elements planning. And so part of the planning process to ultimately create the Lhtako Dene cultural interpretive plan, there was a part of the component was to hire a videographer and to take interviews of elders and certain community members. So One Island Media came up and they interviewed elders, and part of the one of the special deliverables that we got was this video, which was an amalgamation of many of the videos and community interviews that we did. At one of the days, as you'll see in the video, the entire Lhtako Dene community came out for drumming and dancing and interviews, and that it's all part of the video. And so that was kind of an extra to that grant that we didn't initially see, but it kind of progressed and came about that way. But we still have, on top of this 18-minute video, we have full-length interviews with Lhtako Dene elders. So they're tanning hides, moose hides. They're making bannock. They are making tea. So going out and foraging for juniper, and so they talk about it the entire way through, the cultural significance. And another component of the project is that this video right now, it's translated from Carrier to English, but eventually the entire video will also be translated from English to Carrier, so it can be used as an educational component, as can the full-length elders interviews. So yeah, that's how this video came about.
Great, thanks, Lindsay, and sorry for putting you on the spot there. Should have given you a heads up before. But I think that this is important, and with the National Day of Reconciliation coming up on Friday, we've been making a public display of this video until now, so our timing of our council meeting tonight relative to Friday, I think is very important. So we also think, because this will eventually be made available to the public, that showing the entire video to both council and to the public is important as well. And then the videos will then be available more publicly, either distributed through various means to the school district, or we're hoping, I think, to put some of them on our website. Is that correct?
Yeah, I think so. Eventually we'll use them for marketing as well too, but I also just wanted to note all the videos that were created from this project, they're jointly owned with equal rights by Lhtako Dene Nation and the City of Quesnel.
Great, thank you. And Lhtako Dene had final approval of each of them, correct?
Yeah, they had approval. They were consulted the entire way through. They had approval at each stage of production and during the planning. Yeah.
Great, thank you. Okay, so that's the context for this, and this is a video that organically came out of that process that I think is a very powerful statement to what we're dealing with as a society today as a result of the legacy of residential schools. So with that in mind, if we can press play.
When they found there was 215 children that never made it home. That really hurt me. To this day, I still feel it. I'm one of the fortunate ones that made it home. I pray for those who's up there, watching over us. When they found their children in the graves, excuse me. They were brought home. They're finally coming home. I went to residential schools.
I'm one of the residential school survivors.
I'm a residential school survivor. It was run by the Catholic Church. And at the mission, you were never allowed to speak.
When we
we spoke our language, we got hit.
There were other forms of abuse, but I don't really want to go into that either. It was not a great place.
And it was very scary. I didn't know who these people were.
It was like being held in prison. They would make a big bonfire, and so everything, like our regalia, drums and everything went into a fire, and it was all burnt up, so they wouldn't, we wouldn't have anything to do with their culture, you know. They wanted us to be white.
And they took all that away from me. They took everything away from us. They took my language, my culture, my spiritual way. And it really hurts.
And they wanted to assimilate us, but we have survived, you know. Our people have survived this. We've come from a hurtful place. We've come from a place where we're not treated right. Our land's taken from us. Our culture and tradition and our language taken from us. But don't dwell on that. Build on it. Learn the language. Learn the tradition. Learn, and it will help you to heal.
To this day, I'm still learning. They say you never stop learning. You're always learning something new every day.
I'm an elder, but I'm still learning. We learn from different nations. We learn their steps. We learn to share. Show our children it can be done.
The youth, young teenagers, and early elders that don't know how to do it, you need to learn to do medicine of all different kinds. We call this in our language kani, nick berries. And these berries will survive all winter under the snow. So now we go to the main things that we're here for. That's San Algat, the juniper bush. Juniper is our smudging, and we use it for medicine. What about over here? There's a big bush here. It has greenish, whitish color berries on it, and September is the time to harvest juniper. So this is the one with the berries, and we have to find one with no berries. That one back there. Just look at that saya. Yeah. Maslin daughter. Yeah. So no berries. So what you do is gather the plain one, no berries on it. You gather a bunch and have a big pot like this. Start to heat up my water and put half water, and then make sure it's starting to warm up, and then throw all your branch into it and boil it all day in your house. So now I'm pouring. When it's your first time, just take 2 tablespoons or just 2 mouthfuls. Will help your muscle pain, and if you have an ulcer or anything infection in your stomach, it will help.
The teachings of our old ways to the younger generation. That's what we're doing now. Teaching the little ones how to harvest and hunt.
So this is called a brisket. And so what we did was cut the end of the ribs, and it's the front part, and then you could roast it in that or make a soup out of it there. Yeah.
I want to teach their children their language, and also teach them of their land, their medicine plants, their hunting, teach them all that.
Now what he's doing is we're cutting out the rib cage. So we're going against the backbone of the moose where we cut the brisket off.
The esters na techte white-tailed deer here. See that? Two job.
What she's doing is she's trying to get all the liquid out of the hide and then make it look dry.
I was too shy with it, I think.
It's still got a lot of water in it.
But once, niet and that's it's soon.
And if she is going to twirl it the other way, maybe the rest of the liquid will come out of it. When to harvest the meat, when to harvest the medicine, when to harvest the berries.
They need to learn that. They can't count on the store because everything's going up now and everything. Try to teach young generation how to make bannock. We're slowly learning, but it takes practice.
Lhtako means where the 3 waters meet. The Fraser, the Quesnel, and Baker Creek. And we do our hunting, fishing, trapping, and everything here on our territory. We do a lot of traditional things like dancing, drumming, singing.
We are the teachers. We have to continue to teach our traditional way and culture way.
I have 3 jingle dancers in my immediate family.
I have a little girl that's 2 years old, so right now she's just learning.
And makes me proud.
The world is teaching us their ways, but you need to learn your way.
You're happy when you're dancing. Our heart is happy.
kan eske aneye en hunyan kosusi hapagot utan hunyan ko en auche tenahal en auche sabala tantil bahunto.
Elders are so important to our community and culture. They have so much knowledge that they can give us right now. They have it in their body, but sometimes there's just barriers for them actually expressing their knowledge out there. We have to listen to our elders now because we're losing them.
And very few of us that are still fluent carrier speakers, we're actually losing our language, our carrier language. Hardly very many people speak it now. Most of the elders that speak it are all gone, eh?
Yagasta Tabe Sanachaya. I am a fluent speaker of a Southern Carrier language. Whatever knowledge that we have as an elder, we have to come out and start teaching it. And if we don't, we're going to lose everything. So it is very, very important.
Reclamation means taking back our language, taking back our medicines, our traditional medicines that we harvested, but taking back our culture, language, and traditions will once again give us strength, the strength that we have as Native people.
great. Thank you, and glad that the video works seamlessly. So that's awesome. And from a, council has watched our relationship with Lhtako evolve over the years, but I have a great picture of Bryant Paul. One of the meetings that we had was in this chamber leading up to the declaration or the protocol agreement we have signed on the wall. And Bryant said, can we sit in the chairs? And staff will remember. And the elders all came up and sat in the chairs here. And Bryant sat in the mayor's chair. And I looked at him, I said something to the effect of strike a pose or whatever, and he was hysterical. He just puffed himself up, and he took on the mayor's role, and I've got a picture of him sitting there, and then another one he did this, and it was just a lot of fun. But that building of that relationship takes years, and I think we've learned that as a council. As I've often said to people, we enter into these discussions from a transactional perspective, so we have a timeline. We want to get something done, and we'll get the protocol agreement done in 3 months, and so on. And instead, the First Nations approach it from a relational perspective, and you don't get anywhere until you build the trust and the relationship to then take you to the place that they're willing to close off. So I think this is a great testament to the partnership that we have, and I want to thank staff for the work that they've done on that. Any comments or questions from council on this? It was meant to be more of a presentation, but the floor is open if council wishes to make any comments. Councillor Paul.
Thank you. One word, powerful.
Thank you, Councillor Paul. Okay. Seeing no one else, thank you for coming to witness the big reveal here, so much appreciated. So, and thank you again to staff. Okay, we'll move on to our council agenda then. And our first business for the night is the Financial Sustainability and Audit Chair Report.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The purpose of this report is to bring up some highlights from the September 6th Finance Committee meeting. We're kind of wrapping things up now for the year, and then just going to fly right back into it for the next council for sure. So some of the topics that we discussed was the Finance Department update, and the committee was advised that a new financial analyst begins work on September 12th. So that's been ongoing, which is great. Some of the spending issues, overages, natural gas costs are significantly over budget, so that's something that we have to look at in the future for sure. We received the Royal Canadian Mounted Police reconciliation for 21-22, and it's usually a credit. This year it's a cost of $210,844. Potential fee increases. The committee discussed the potential effects of inflation on the city's cost structure and what effect that will have on the city's fee increases this year. Water and sewer fees will likely have to be increased more than usual. And the committee also agreed that the fee bylaw will be the first thing dealt with by the new financial committee in November, December. Budget 22-23 initial discussion advice for the next council. The committee discussed the potential effects of inflation on budget 2023. The committee also discussed the challenges with contractors and supplies and the process involving getting capital projects off the ground. There's just so much behind it. We don't actually see what's happening with staff all the time, but things like archaeological reviews that have to take place if we're going to be digging in the ground, so that can slow things down significantly. As mentioned, supply chain, it's not just here, it's not just with our staff, obviously, but worldwide, and we're really feeling those effects as well. Other projects that the new committee is going to have to dig into, and the new council, landfill is one that's going to be we really have to dig in deep, and that's going to be a cost to us in the future for sure. And other financial concerns, and mentioned in here earlier, was inflation. It's just something that we really have to keep our eye on over the next little while. Make sure that we budget for it correctly, and just be ready, because it's at rates that we haven't seen since I've been here. That's for sure. And that's the report. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Rudenberg, and then Councillor Rowe.
Thank you. So the overreach for the RCMP, the 210,844, that came with an explanation. Is that part of the cost that we knew that was coming down for the retro pay for the RCMP contract?
No, this is not retro pay. This is all related to costs from 2021, 22. So what they do is they work on a forecast all year based on how many members they think we have, what they think the costs were, and when they did the final reconciliation, obviously, like all of us, they were hit by a lot of inflation and cost increases at the end, that when they did the reconciliation, we all owed them, which is unusual.
Okay, Councillor Runge, then Councillor Vic.
Yes, thank you. Two quick questions. Do we have, with the natural gas costs significantly over budget, do we have like a percentage that's attached to that?
Natural gas costs has gone up 15 to 20% since last year. It's significant, yeah.
And then my second question is not so much to the cost, but more to the budget consultation survey that we normally run in, I guess, October, November, which comes right at the changeover of council. Are we already planning something so that we get some consultation from our public also on this? Because that's going to hit us right, as we do a changeover.
Yeah, well, our intent is to do Let's Connect again and to have a survey on there. It'll again will be one of the first discussion items with the new FSAC committee when we get rolling.
Yeah, and the budget survey is guided by council, so it's not a staff will bring some recommendations, but it's actually guided by council, so we do need the new council constituted. But council will recall we had a very deliberate decision put in front of us going into this budget, where because of cost savings from the previous year, we could have reduced the taxation down. We chose to leave the taxation at the approved level, the pre-approved level that we'd had before, because we didn't know what these inflation costs would do to the budget. So I think it was a prudent decision at the time, and hopefully it was a sufficient amount of buffer that we can absorb some of these inflationary costs that we're now experiencing. So, okay, Councillor Vic.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. It's sort of a follow-up to Councillor Rudenberg regarding the overage with the RCMP reconciliation. So, with this increase settled for this fiscal year, is this sort of the new standard, or is it a one-time blip because of inflationary costs? Can we expect it to be at a higher mark going forward?
I'm hoping it's a one-time thing. It's hard to know, right? Like, they reconcile every year. We just always received a credit. This is the first time they've been caught where they obviously forecasted lower than what the actuals ended up being, right? So, and at this point, we're still under in manning, so we should still be okay for the whole year in terms of our total budget. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think we've also given direction to the staff sergeant and others to try and be careful with their dialogue with where they're putting their billing in and everything else as well, to be a bit more deliberate in that interaction, and that could be part of that back and forth as they get a little bit tighter on what they do, that we actually get closer or below on the projections. So there's a lot of dynamics in how Kerry actually interacts with the RCMP. At one point, I believe it was the city of Williams Lake, because they had an ex-RCMP officer come in as the administrator, or Fort St. John, that was going line item by line item through to try and figure out how they were doing these reconciliations and to make sure they weren't overcharging in some areas, and you were actually getting the service delivery that they were charging you for, and so on. And that, I think, Director Bolton, you actually reached out, because I think at one point we were talking about whether we needed to do that or not, and yeah, you would probably need somebody spending a long time to reconcile that way. So there is a trust relationship there, and it's a bit of a dynamic relationship too, right? So, Councillor Paul.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. My question is a bit similar to Councillor Vic's question, but it's this, that is there anything on record that speaks to how the City of Quesnel's RCMP requisition compares to other municipalities? In other words, is Quesnel an anomaly, or is that generally across the board where municipalities are seeing this kind of an increase?
So we are part of the Northern Division, so our costs aren't based just on Quesnel. They're based on the Northern Division and divided by how many officers everyone has at each division. So everybody in the North would have seen an increase, not just us.
Okay, any other questions on this? Seeing none, thank you, Councillor Elliott, for your role as chair of the Finance Committee. Next item up is a verbal report from me from the UBCM convention. Again, Councillor Goulet sends his regrets. He was my second chair in all of the meetings that we had with the ministers, and Councillor Rudenberg, or Madam Past President now of UBCM, was taken up by her responsibilities during the convention, but was able to attend one of the meetings that I actually was not able to attend myself. A couple of context pieces for UBCM before I get into what the conversations that we had with the various ministers. First, I was down at Whistler early, because I had an opportunity to get some independent time with the Minister of Forest and the Parliamentary Secretary for Forestry, and I did attend the BC Wood reception with them as well. That was a really good opportunity for some quiet time with the minister around old growth deferrals, around forest policy that's coming forward, and some of the things that we're trying to do with our Forestry Innovation Center and Forestry Think Tank process. So we've been trying to lock the minister in to kick off our next think tank session. And I realized in talking to her and her staff that we've been doing it backwards. We've been setting a date and then going and seeing if she was available. So what Aaron Robinson, our manager for Forestry Innovation Center there, will be doing is working with the staff for a mid-February date that the minister will lock in, and then we'll build the think tank around her time. And she's committed to making that happen. So we will be doing a forestry think tank session with the minister being our keynote and kickoff, and we'll book that and get that out fairly quickly. We're overdue to reinvigorate that think tank process. I also, because I was down there a bit early, had a good long working lunch with the minister on a number of other issues on the Sunday when I was back in Whistler. The other interesting thing about UBCM this year, it was a rather strange one from the perspective of the dynamic interaction between the participants, the cabinet ministers, and so on. So at any given time, and Councillor Rudenberg can speak to this, at any given time in a workshop or in a luncheon or whatever, somebody would invariably thank those who are not running for office again. And I think at the NCLJ luncheon, it was at least a third of the room when they were asked to stand and be recognized, they stood, and at least a third of the room was not running for office again. And it was done on the convention floor as well, and the numbers that weren't running were quite large. So you had that dynamic of a bunch of people who were down in Whistler who, won't have the continuity into their next council, mayors in particular. There's a lot of mayors not running. The second dynamic was when you were sitting with cabinet ministers, they quite frankly weren't sure that they were going to be the cabinet minister in that portfolio post the change in the NDP leadership, because of course a new premier coming in will put his stamp on their cabinet. So there was that kind of dynamic of some of the council or some of the cabinet ministers who believed that they were there, and some of the cabinet ministers who believed that they weren't. And you were more talking to staff in the meetings where the cabinet minister may not have been as vested as you were in other meetings. And then the third piece, of course, is the premier's leaving. And so the premier, when he gave his final speech at UBCM, spent more time kind of doing a good old Irish reminiscing and talking to the audience and the other retirees. And I know from inside sources didn't make some announcements that he was supposed to make. And so the staff were kind of scrambling because he went off script to tell his stories. And so I did get some time with the premier and got an opportunity to chat with him privately. I think he's done a a phenomenal job in his role, and I've known him for a long time, of course, with my past. So I think he will be sorely missed in that role, and depending on what happens with the NDP leadership, we've got to restore a relationship with the Premier's office that we've enjoyed over the last number of years. So it was a very kind of interesting dynamic, and Councillor Rudenberg, if she wants to weigh in after I've done my report, she's welcome to add or detract from my commentary on that. So with respect to the meetings directly, of course, those of you who have been at UBCM know that my previous life gives me access to a lot of the ministers, their staff, etc., because I know lots of them. So a lot of the work that I did was actually outside of these meetings, being able to talk to staff in various ministries, being able to talk to some of the ministers offline out of the formal meetings, but I'll just report out on the formal ones. We had a meeting with the Minister of Environment and Climate Change, Minister Heyman. We were able to outline for their ministry all of the innovative projects that we do have on the go. Our lignin project, the 3D printing project, the work that we've done on accessory dwelling units, and the fact that we have one of those is a net zero potential accessory dwelling unit pre-designed and pre-approved. But subsequent to us doing our ADUs, I don't know if people are aware of Winton Global, the prefabricating home manufacturer up in Prince George. So when I was at the session with BC Wood, I had an opportunity to talk to one of their principals there about their interest in, if we've got a pre-approved design, could they actually do a pre-packaging of that? Could they pre-build those so that we could actually go lockstep from somebody coming in and saying, yes, that will fit on your property, whether it's a carriage house or whether it's a laneway house. Yes, you're pre-approved. We're not going to charge you building permit, et cetera, to go ahead and do it. Winton is very curious about whether they could then just phone Winton up and say, can you deliver one of these units pre-built so that it's up in a heartbeat? It's not stick-built, it's prefabricated, etc. They're interested to the point, and this is why we were raising it with the climate ministry, they're interested to the point that they might be, depending on what they think the uptake would be, and because they're small scale, they may actually go to the next level of prefab, which is more the European model, where it's plug and play. So the walls are completely built. They're built to the highest code standard, and they're built to, and/or built to net zero, and they come as prefabricated walls, roof, etc., and all that happens is the plumbing plugs into itself, the electro plugs into itself, and bam, you put it up, and something that small, you could have a house go from zero to a house in 3 days in that kind of prefab. So Aaron Robinson and myself, and I believe Amy's getting invited to that meeting, but I'm not sure. It's just being set up because of the economic development aspects of that, are going to have that conversation with Winton, and I think it takes us to another level of excitement. But what it allowed me to do was make my main point with the Minister of Environment. And that is that all of their Clean BC, all of their low carbon initiatives for innovation are eligible only for corporations. And we were making this case with the Minister of Environment and the Minister of Energy. They need to make municipalities eligible for their innovation funds, because more and more it's us at the local government level that are bringing the partners together, that are facilitating the conversations, and that are the catalyst for innovation. So the lignin asphalt project, as an example, would not have happened if our Forestry Innovation Center and our staff were not running that process and working with all those partners. So that was perfect for me to be able to say, look, we've had these conversations, we can pull these pieces together, but wouldn't it be great if you guys funded the first 6 of these or the first 10 of these so that we can prove it out and you guys underwrite the risk that Winton Global is going to have to take, but we're the eligible applicant for that. So So that was perfect for us. And then, of course, we went through our desires for our district heating, which, of course, is now in the proving up stage. And again, we would be the lead in that project to facilitate that, even though the energy would be coming from Caribou Pulp and Paper for that project. So we've been able to get the funding together for the feasibility study, the technical work, and the business case. But in order to move that to actually doing it, we need the provincial government, federal government to come to the table. So that was the main gist of the conversation with the Minister of Environment. We then had a meeting with the Minister of Mental Health and Addictions. And quite frankly, my main push was there is that the relationship that senior levels of government are forcing us to have with peer organizations is becoming very dangerous. We've been saying that to them for a number of years now, but we were able to illustrate this time very clearly that we have a situation in Quesnel, the encampment on the riverfront, that has been engineered by some folks from Vancouver who have come up here, interfered in our community, created a situation that's quite frankly untenable, and have $500,000 in funding from Canada Health. And they may not have liked what we were saying, but it was great to have Councillor Goulet with me, who, of course, in his daytime job is the chair or the executive director of the Native Friendship Centre, who was able to speak directly to that issue. We also talked about the fact that we need more supports for families in need, and we need more proactive support to intervene to prevent people from ending up street entrenched and ending up in the throes of addictions. And that's been a message that we've been given to government for quite some time. So that was a bit of a terse conversation, but I think the staff and the minister understood that we did have some illustrative examples that we've been putting in front of them for a while. Then Minister of Agriculture. And with the Minister of Agriculture, we gave the Minister an update on the Food Innovation Hub. We're still trying to get, the check is in the mail, $225,000. Has that been resolved yet? Okay, so we're still, there's some residual monies owed to us that will allow us to pick up the reefer truck and various other things to keep it going. And then, interestingly enough, we were talking about one of the things that came as a result of the storm that hit the Lower Mainland last year is how stranded we became in many areas of the province on a food security basis, because the food supply chain was severely disrupted. Of course, here we have the luxury of flicking a switch and going to a northern route and bringing in the supplies from Edmonton's supply station through Highway 16, but lots of areas don't. So we were making the case that now that we've got the Food Innovation Hub up and running and we're looking at more food processing, food production, and the minister's very interested in us tying that into food security and looking at food waste being turned into soups and stews and things like that as well. But we were talking about whether or not we can do some planning around things like a more local abattoir, more local dairy production facility, et cetera, and actually tighten the regional supply chain by getting into food processing and production at a larger scale than the food hub would even allow us to do. So the minister's interested in that. She's committed to coming up here sometime in November, and we can convene a table for her to have that conversation. Interestingly enough, you may have read in the news that Estela, the Alexandria band, has received funding to build an abattoir on their Highway 97 side, and so it's something that I plan on following up with because we've been working on getting an abattoir here since, I don't know, 2004, 2005, something like that. So it's been a long burn. Then the next minister was Minister Rankin. I did have a one-on-one conversation with Minister Rankin outside of this meeting that is important for council to be aware of. And it was a follow-up conversation to the BC Housing presentation and the decision council made on the Ramada. I wanted to follow up because Minister Rankin is actually the Minister of Indigenous Relations and Reconciliation. But because Minister Eby has had to step down from his portfolio as attorney, I always get them wrong, Solicitor General, right? No, Attorney General and Housing. Then Minister Rankin's picked that file up. So he has the housing file. So, but I didn't have a meeting booked with him as the housing minister. So Murray gave me a call. We had a long conversation on the phone, and I have been assured that giving him the background of what happened with the Ramada situation and the rejection of that proposal by the community and council's subsequent decision on second reading, that we will not be seen in an unfavorable light for future BC housing funding. That the minister understands the situation we were put in. And the main message I was giving to him is, while you may give as a government BC Housing hurry up money, we can't afford a hurry up process at the community level. These are not hurry up decisions, and they have to be more thoughtful. So I apprised him of the $100K that we have assigned to do that deeper process. He was quite pleased with that, but I did get his assurance that we have not hurt ourselves as a community with respect to future funding for housing projects through BC Housing. When I met with him as the Indigenous Relations and Reconciliation Minister, we brought him up to date with our reconciliation projects. And one of the issues I brought up with him in that, and it's more as apprising him of what we're doing, because we're trying to leverage capital dollars from the federal and provincial governments. Our argument with those governments is they're kind of dumping the realization of UNDRIP and DRIPA onto local governments. We're the ones on the ground. We're the ones fostering the relationships with First Nations, and those relationships lead to partnerships, and those partnerships lead to projects. But there's nowhere in the system that we can capitalize those projects. So really, we were saying you've got to go back to Treasury Board, you've got to work with your federal counterparts and free up infrastructure dollars for reconciliation projects. And the minister heard that loud and clear, and I've had some subsequent conversations with other ministers, including some federal folks, about that. So I'm hoping in the next coming budgets we may actually see some dollars being freed up for that. And you'll see one tonight that, you know, the Northern Trust has a cultural stream and so on. So it's coming a little bit, but not at the scale that we need. The one area that I was kind of interesting is I said to him, okay, you know, the province has passed your DRIPA legislation, so it's enacting UNDRIP into provincial government decisions. And I said, we won the bid for the BC Winter Games. And he said, good for you. And I said, yeah, it was a joint bid by Lhtako Dene Nation and the city of Quesnel. Oh, that's awesome. I said, yes. And the Winter Games won't allow us to call it the Lhtako Quesnel Winter Games. And there was stony silence on the other. And the minister said, what? I said, yeah, they accepted a joint bid, but we can't name it Lhtako Quesnel because their whole process is it will be the Quesnel Winter Games. And he looked at his deputy minister and he said, that's fixable. We've got a phone call subsequent to UBCM from the president of the Winter Games, and the chief and I will be chatting with her. I believe it's Thursday this week, and we hopefully will get that resolved. What we want to do is call it Lhtako-Quesnel BC Winter Games 2024, have all of our marketing around that relationship that we built with Lhtako, and we would be the first ever in the history of British Columbia to have that recognition inherent in that. But again, as we've said to the BC Games all along, you accepted a joint bid. I'm not sure where anybody would say it's acceptable to just name one of the successful bidders in the process. So that would be pretty cool. Then we met with the Parliamentary Secretary for Emergency Preparedness. We had quite the conversation about where EMBC is going. And of course, what we've got on our side is we need to understand better some of the legislative changes that they plan on making to Emergency Management BC, because they're talking about enabling funding for proactive work and in more substantive funding for reactive work, whereas EMBC just now can only come in and have the financial partnership with any immediate crisis and immediate aftermath of the crisis. So, for example, Baker Creek, there's the immediate crisis and immediate aftermath, but there's all this residual aftermath that then, if EMBC's out and we want to do the work, it's on our dime. But not only that, in order to prevent that again, we actually need to do some pretty sophisticated work along that creek. Golden, for example, has hardened the banks of the river running through their town because of flooding, et cetera. So I was chatting with them about that, and they get that, and we're going to see the legislation come out. But the other thing I said to them is, during an emergency situation, we get full license. The Department of Fisheries and Oceans not there, the Ministry of Environment's not there, the Ministry of Fisheries is not there. We just get to do what we need to do. We need that same kind of license if we come up with engineered solutions that prevent those crises. Because right now, the way that the legislation is, if we want to go in and do something in Baker Creek and it's not an emergency, then we're going through all the hoops of DFO and MOE and everything else, right? So we have to be able to connect those two pieces together, that if we get expertise, engineers, hydrologists, geologists, et cetera, who say, this is the way you avoid the next crisis, then the provincial and federal governments need to be able to give us a legislative backstopping to say, okay, now you've got permission to go ahead and do that, without local DFO people coming at us with, you know, whatever they come at us with in those situations when they don't want us to do stuff. So. Okay, so that was good discussion. I did speak with them about our particular circumstance here with respect to a long, slow landslide. So we did have conversations about supports for homeowners impacted by landslides. They indicated that they're going to be doing something around those lines. And again, for council's edification, right now, if it's not declared a disaster, none of the private homeowner or landowner funding is triggered. So, of course, we've got a situation that's not a disaster on the west side, but in the case of the veterinary clinic on Dragon Hill or the other ones that are along Maple Drive, et cetera, that's not a disaster either. So there's no funding envelope for the individuals who are impacted by those one-off situations. So we did get an indication that they're contemplating trying to do something along those lines because, of course, if you look at the CRD's report that was just published, there's a lot of potential private land, private homeowner impacts. So, you as exhausted as we were yet? Because I've still got a few to go. We had a meeting with Minister Ralston, Energy, Mines, Low Carbon. Again, as I've indicated, one of the main messages was we gave him a kind of a list of all the fun things we've got on the go on the low carbon side, but made the pitch that we need to be eligible for some of the funding they're making eligible to corporations. But one of the big pieces that we were bringing to Minister Ralston is the electrification of the Barkerville corridor for the Barkerville mine. And I coordinated with the Mayor of Wells, Mayor Coleman. As council may be aware, we do have NDI funding. We were successful in getting Northern Trust funding to hire a consultant. That consultant is putting to bed all of the arguments and counter arguments as to why that three-phase power isn't being pulled down the Barkerville corridor, why a whole different corridor has to be used that doesn't allow Troll and Wing Dam and others to get access to that power easily, and also the requirement, because it's a private power line, that at the end of the Barkerville Gold project, it all gets rolled back up again and can't be used to power up wells in Barkerville, et cetera. So BC Hydro was in the room. And in the past, those who have been involved in this conversation, it ends up a bun fight with BC Hydro, where BC Hydro claims we don't know what we're talking about, we claim that they don't know what they're talking about, and we get no resolution to anything. So I said to them, and because we did the introductions, I said to BC Hydro folks, I'm not here to argue with you. I'm here to let you know that we're going to be doing a report that puts to bed all the arguments we've had in the past. and that you will be involved in that process, but this isn't the argument. The argument will be on the report coming forward. So I let Mayor Coleman know that BC Hydro accepted that approach, and we just need to make sure that they're engaged in the process of putting the report together, and we're hoping the report comes together before the end of this year and can be advanced to try and get resolution to that. Had a very good meeting with Minister Dix, Health Minister, of course. Unfortunately, Minister Dix was the target for a lot of rhetoric and a lot of animus during the UBCM. I think unfairly. I had a lot of heated conversations with mayors and asked them why they felt that they could go in and blame an individual for what is a massive systemic issue, and that's the healthcare recruitment challenge we've got. You know, did they think he had a magic wand in his back pocket and could wave it, and we would all of a sudden appear a whole bunch of nurses and doctors and healthcare practitioners, et cetera? It was a lot of noise down there. So we did talk about the long-term care project in Quesnel. It's still in the process with Treasury Board. We did talk about capital funding for healthcare projects in my capacity as the chair of the Caribou Chilcotin Regional Hospital District, and then expediting the land transfer from the helipad area post the GR Baker project. But one of the things that, and I had a conversation with Northern Health today about it, that's not in the healthcare recruitment retention issue, is that even if you end up getting your full complement of practitioners, today's lifestyle decisions that these practitioners are making mean that they're not carrying the same patient load, or they're not willing to work the same hours. So the way that Northern Health would be funded is on a per capita or per patient load basis and an assignment of FTEs. So even in Quesnel, for example, we're operating in a better position than any other community in Northern Health, according to Northern Health. Yet on our physician side, we have more primary care physicians practicing today than we've ever had, but we have more non-aligned patients. We have more patients who are not being served. And the reason for that is that today's doctors carry a major reduction in patient load than yesterday's doctors did. So you actually need to up the complement of funded physician positions you have in your community to match what the doctors are now carrying as patients. So that's, and Minister Dix understood that, understood it wasn't part of the dynamic we're having just now, but again, because of our position as a community, willing to work with us to try and figure out what a new patient load FTE may look like. We met with Minister of Transportation and Infrastructure, and of course, no surprise, two major conversations with him, the Interconnector Project and the Johnson Bridge Project. The Interconnector Project, I would have to say, touch wood, I've finally made a breakthrough on that project, that we're not asking for the $300+ million for the interconnector project at this time. What we're asking for is the nominal $1.52 million to turn the feasibility study into a project. So that we have the business case, we have all the technical work done, we have everything done. And I think finally, both the minister and his staff understood that in order for us to maintain traction on this project, that step needs to be taken. And we're going to follow up with a letter, and I'm hoping Chief LeBrun will join me in that request. And it's just a nominal request to Treasury Board that keeps the project alive and keeps it ticking along. We did raise with them, we've been having ongoing conversations with the Ministry of Transportation about the rehabilitation of the Quesnel River Bridge and the rail bridge. We did raise with them that post the interconnector project, we might be interested in trying to keep those bridges, especially if they're rehabilitated, and incorporate them into our active transportation network. It does three things for us if that's possible. One, it reduces the cost of the interconnector project and deals with some pretty substantive issues with pedestrian integration into that big roundabout on the south end of the interconnector, where we've been trying to figure out how do you get your bike pathway and your pedestrian pathway into a roundabout. So if we were able to pull that all offline, that would be great. The second thing it does for us is there's a lot of infrastructure hung on that bridge that would then not have to be moved and incorporated into the new bridges. And the third is it would give another alternate, if it's built properly, another alternate routing during emergencies, access, egress, et cetera, or if there was a catastrophic event on the new bridges that took up all 4 lanes. So they were quite interested in that possibility, as was the team that we met with previously, the technical team as well. So that's just out there floating around for future conversation. With respect to the Johnson Bridge, again, we're going to follow this up with a letter. The minister continued his commitment that should we be successful in getting the money from the UBCM gas tax funds, whenever they make that decision, that he is willing to consider coming to the table in some capacity, because that's a regional asset, not just a local asset, and help us with our contribution towards that project, because that's going to be a big hit on our reserves. So again, a good meeting. And then I wasn't able to attend the last 2 meetings with Minister Callon, Jobs, Economic Recovery and Innovation, and Minister Cullen, Municipal Affairs, because I went over to the 55+ games to take a look at that and attend the AGM, because of course we're putting a joint bid in for those games, and they happen to be over in Victoria. So Councillor Goulet was able to attend both, and Councillor Rudenberg was able to attend the one with Minister Callon. In terms of the topics covered, and then Councillor Rudenberg can speak to the Callon one if you would like to. We wanted to bring Minister Callon up to date on the innovation projects that we've got on the go across the board, because that's part of his portfolio, and make sure we get him back up in town again so that he sees those. And then the other really is along the lines of our training needs. That with a lot of innovation comes a lot of retraining, and we have actual training proposals that we've been shopping around for funding for quite some time, and I think we wanted the minister to really start paying attention to that and funding some of those proposals. And for Quesnel, we then become a regional training hub, so it's a great economic development opportunity for us too. So Councillor Rudenberg, did you want to add to that one? You were in.
Certainly, and the fact that the notes that you gave us were probably 3 pages long, and we have 15 minutes to speak to the minister, and I know you're aware of that. Anyway, we managed to actually really hit more about the need for education, because we're talking about the innovative projects that are happening and the different types of jobs that are future thinking for forestry, et cetera, that there needs to be that education component designed and funded, right? And you made us aware that he might try to fluff it off to another ministry, and we said, no, this is important for this ministry, because you're the innovation minister, you're the jobs, the economic recovery guy, and so you need to be able to figure out how you can work with all these great innovative projects, but how do you train people to actually be able to do them? So I think he had a team of about 8 or 9 people with him, so I think they heard us because we just made sure that they understood that this was not just an advanced education piece. This was it had to be a joint piece.
Great, thank you. And then the final one with Minister Cullen. I got a text from the minister after the meeting saying, too bad you weren't here because I had a check to give you. And I went, what? There was money on the table that I didn't know? I'd have been there in a heartbeat. So Minister Cullen and I had a follow-up post Councillor Goulet meeting with them. We were trying to get the message across that as our champion in cabinet, he has to be paying closer attention to the downloading that's happening in our communities, and particularly on the social side, the issues around mental health, addictions, housing, et cetera, that he has to pay more attention to what does that look like from a local government perspective. Of course, because he's a minister with that portfolio, but he doesn't have local government experience. So he doesn't know what happens around these tables and the regional district tables. And then the other piece that was pitched to him was around climate change, and he's quite a strong advocate for climate change mitigation, adaptation, and treating it as a real threat. But what we were indicating to him is that, again, local government can be climate leaders, but we need to be resourced. We can't do it on the backs of property taxation. And we were able to give them the example of the grant we got from the Federation of Canadian Municipalities to put a plan together. Now we'd like to activate that plan, but to actually say you got to do that on the basis of property taxation is patently unfair. This is a global issue. It's an issue that the province needs to underwrite. So Councillor Goulet delivered that message to him, and I was able to follow up with him afterwards. So sorry for the long report, but as we've done in past years, I think it's important that Council is aware of the range of issues that we're taking to the provincial government. I have been invited to speak at an economic summit in Nanaimo on my birthday, October 27th. My wife is not too happy that I said yes, or maybe she is, I don't know. Anyway, that week the House is sitting, so I intend to do what I normally do post UBCM is I'll book a bunch of follow-up meetings with the ministers so that I can actually track a lot of the stuff outside of the speed dating of UBCM, where they get a lot from a lot of people. So that's my verbal report. And Councillor Rudenberg, if you wanted to make some comments on UBCM, please do.
That would be great. Thank you. Just a couple comments on a few things that you touched base on around the gas tax announcements. Those are going to be coming through on the spring of 2023. And, when you talk about the whole climate action and having monies available for communities, because our taxation base is not designed to pay for what's coming or what's happening through our climate emergency, that was an advocacy item for UBCM in May, and was very loud and clear about local governments needing that support if they want to move forward with their climate action plan on so many different levels. Over 1,600 delegates attended this year UBCM, which I think we were a little surprised at the number, given that people still are somewhat hesitant to be in large crowds, but those that were there wanted to be there. They attended everything, and it was sold out or filled up no matter what forum or event that was happening. Lots of different highlights, the healthcare crisis piece. I know what you're talking about with some of the mayors of the province, because I had to shut down one during a forum because she was quite ignorant. Lots of discussion around housing. We all know how complicated that is. And also a little bit around like the First Nations piece with the implementation of DRIPA from a provincial perspective, and the action plan that the government has had. And so there's a couple different sessions that we're talking about what that looks like for local government, including the discussion on the action item that the province is going to look at how First Nations can have representation at regional district boards, despite the fact that they're not treaty nations, because right now it's only treaty nations that could, in theory, sit on a board. And so those are all parts of the discussions that are happening at a provincial level. And then the other big one that really hit home, because I heard so many different stories, was around the culture of social media and the impact it's having on local government and media themselves. There are lots of stories on some of the targeted attacks that are happening, from anonymous sources to what happened to Chrystia Freeland with a gentleman in Alberta. And it really hit home, not just for women in politics, but also some of the men. It was really quite interesting to listen to their stories. And so huge piece on that, and the toll it's taken on mental health for a lot of local government people. I know that the Lieutenant Governor wanted to come and speak about the mental health for elected officials, but unfortunately she was put into a period of mourning for the Queen, so she was unable to attend. But I know that she's going to follow up with one of our past presidents on talking about what mental health means for local government. And so, yeah, lots of great things happened during the week, and it was a great way to leave the presidency of UBCM. And I want to say thank you to you guys for being so supportive. I tried not to miss too many meetings, and you guys were there to support me. So thank you very much for that. I appreciate it very much.
Thank you. And depending on the reconstitution of council, and should you be on council, then, you know, whoever's mayor can lean on you to do more work here now that you're freed up. But just, maybe you can explain, as past president, what is that role? Because that's, I think, important for people to understand.
So still attend board meetings, and so those are 4 board meetings a year. I'm sort of that person that the president can lean on for, you know, any kind of historical value they might need. And it's another voice at the table. I still have a voice at the table. I still get to vote. I still get to say my 2 cents worth. It just has past president behind my name now instead of president.
Great, thank you. Okay, any questions or comments on UBCM minister meetings? Councillor Vic.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. That was a lot of information. Thank you. And thank you for the effort there. That's a tremendous amount of work for our community. So I have a couple of questions just from the notes that I took from your presentation. So with Think Tank Session 2.0, can you glean, or can we glean any hints on sort of a focus or direction of how that would look? Specifically, for what I'm interested in is in the context of innovation.
Yeah, I think would actually be 4.0.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, our first think tank was about what do we need to think about. And so in terms of rethinking the forest sector, the second think tank was focused more on the land base and how do you plan for ecological resiliency, and some of the wood manufacturing innovation. And then the third one was, okay, if we're going to innovate, what do we need to do on the workforce side? So what are the jobs going to look like, particularly on the manufacturing side? So that's where, for example, in the government's faced with this just now around mass timber. So it's fine to say we're going to move into mass timber, but if designers and architects don't know what mass timber is as a building product, and you know, red seal carpenters have never done any work with mass timber, etc., you have to actually map out the whole human resource continuum so that if you say we want to build with mass timber, you actually have a supply chain and a trained workforce to be able to use it, right? So that was that one. And then the 4.0 would be, I think what we're talking about with that one is to really try and tighten what we want to do around the landscape. How do you bring that landscape, particularly west of the Fraser, back to ecological resiliency so that you can actually then look at what it's going to produce? Because the forests in British Columbia have been managed for timber. But timber management has led to these big-scale disturbances, mountain pine beetles and fires and so on. So if you're going to go back in there and manage it so that the land base and the forest ecosystems are resilient, then you're going to have more deciduous, you're going to have more open space, you're going to have to go in and cull at a younger age than a normal saw log. So that question of, okay, so what would that land base produce then drives your economics. So what do we do with that stuff, right? So that's the land base is still your main source for whatever you got to innovate on the other side. But the real issue we're having on the landscape pilot and ecological resiliency is lots of people are using the same language, but they're not have the same meaning. So when people talk about forest ecosystems, some of our foresters are still talking about timber management and not ecological forests, right, that would survive large-scale disturbance. So cleaning up some of that language, what do we mean when we say, and what are we trying to achieve in a vision would be part of the focus. And then the other focus we really want to drive is the whole bioproducts side of things. So the stuff we're doing on lignin, the stuff we're doing on bioconcrete, the alternate uses of biomaterials that are digested and then make bioplastics, et cetera. We want to dig in a lot deeper on that. And of course, we've done a report looking at where that market's going. But for us as a community, it's the future of our 2 pulp mills and potentially the future of the MDF plant, because those 3 are digesting plants at their core. And so can they divert into these alternate markets, right? So it'll be, we're going to flesh it out, but that's kind of where we're thinking about going. And one of the things we've been saying to the government all along, what's missing to get us from where we are now to where we want to go is the step-by-step roadmap. And so we may actually do some contract work to say, okay, if you've got a saw log in your community, these are the steps to take that saw log to a mass timber or a glue lam or whatever to get it there. If you've got a pulp mill in your community, these are the steps you need to take to get it to become a bioproducts facility. So there's a bit of a roadmap where you can then go to your industry and say, why aren't you moving down this roadmap, right? The markets are there, the products are there, you can actually do that kind of thing instead of coming and crying to us that your taxes have to be reduced, right? So that's the flavor so far.
And if you'll allow me one more question, regarding our potential health facility, which we've been anxiously awaiting Treasury Board decision on, I guess I need to understand, we've gone through an entire budget year now where that's been in front of Treasury Board. It feels like it anyways. At what point is that decision going to be made?
So what is it they're calling the workforce thing? I always get it, is it the great retirement or the great disappearance or whatever?
Resignation?
The great resignation or the quiet resignation or whatever they're calling it. So what's happening at Treasury Board is the great reset, because they have a lot of capital deployed just now and a lot of projects that are not completed on time, that have issues with price inflation and so on. So their current capital year is a bit of a mess because of what happened to it. And we're not much different on our end. We've got capital projects we couldn't advance. We've had to delay to next year. We've got capital projects that went up in price, et cetera. If you take that scale and multiply it by 1,000,000-fold, that's what they've got. So it may feel like a long time, but it's because it got caught up in that great reset. So if you take a look at the junior school, it was supposed to have kids in it and not be a project as of, I think the initial time was spring break, right? And it's now still a project with kids in it, right? You look at the report you're going to get from Director Norburn tonight, where we had an approved project on childcare that went from an original price of $1.5 million to $3.5 million during the duration of the government making the decision of what they're funding. So Treasury Board has that in spades. So what they're trying to do is a bit of a reset. Part of that reset is, okay, where are contractors available and where are we getting no bids? So, for example, Caribou Memorial Hospital is a very special type of contractor you need to build that. If you've got 6 other hospitals out that are already committed to, the question Treasury Board's asking, will you get any bids if you put that out there? So why would we put capital to something that's not going to get a bid? So contractor. The other piece is, will the workforce be there to build the thing? So if you get a bid, will you actually have the workforce for the contractor to then actually go build it? And then the third piece, in the case of things like long-term care or expansions to hospital services, et cetera, is the workforce there to staff it? So after you build it, can you actually staff it and run it, right? So all of that's what's delaying the decisions. And it's not just our project, it's across the board on public projects, schools, hospitals, whatever. Yeah, okay. Councillor Elliott.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And just a quick question about your conversations with Minister Dix, the Minister of Health. And I can't imagine having that job and just getting trashed continually. It's so difficult. But we did a lot of work with the doctor recruitment and attraction, and I mean, it was so popular that communities all over Canada were taking a look at it, and I mean, I don't think that helped us any. But in your conversations and what you were hearing from the minister, is there more coming out from their end, and what is there a partnership? Is there more that we can be doing with them to help the situation, or you know, because apparently we're ahead of the game in some areas of this, but I mean, we all need help, and I know it's not a quick fix, but is there something else in it as far as the partnership that we can be doing to help?
Yeah, that partnership wouldn't be with the health ministry, or the minister will continue to be with Northern Health. And so I had a very long conversation with the Health Services Administrator today as a follow-up to the conversation that I had with the minister. We're going to meet with them, with our healthcare recruiter and with our manager of economic development to take a look at where we need to be more deliberate. They're willing to map out their key vulnerabilities that they've got, and then we can use some of our tools to start looking at some of those key vulnerabilities. One area that we were talking about, for example, is LPNs. And since we lost the LPN program here, I think 8 or 10 years ago or so, it's become a bit of a critical situation for us that we didn't have when we ran the program here. So as chair of the hospital district, I can put the other hat on, where I know the hospital district is interested in, and we just got an expansion to our program, but they're interested in coming kind of all in on what other things we need to do on the housing front, on the training front, or whatever the case may be. So we're going to do that. We're going to sit and actually look at it more deliberately about where the vulnerabilities are. But the other piece that they're doing, again at the Northern Health level with the sanction of the Ministry of Health, is they're looking at alternate training models so that they can take nurses that are nurse generalists and give them the ICU skills or the ER skills or the maternity skills in a way that allows them to stay in their community and still have a bit of work-life balance but get skilled up. Because right now a lot of those nurses would have to leave town to go get the training and then leave town for the duration of the practicum associated with it. So they're very actively looking at all of the pieces. And what I said to them today is we want to be actively looking at how we support those pieces, right? Can we do more of what we've been doing? So, okay. Anything else? Okay, thank you for your forbearance on that then. And if you do have any questions or whatever afterwards, feel free to just give me a call. Okay, moving on to then our staff reports, and starting off with Lhtako Dene Park. And it's not the one that's in your agenda, it's the one that's separate and on your desk.
Yeah, thank you. You'll notice the staff report that's on your desk. The only thing that's changed in it are the financials, and the third recommendation is removed from the updated report. The purpose of this report is to gain Council's approval to submit applications to Infrastructure Canada's Natural Infrastructure Fund and to Northern Development Initiative Trust's Cultural Infrastructure Stream for the Lhtako Dene Park project. The Lhtako Dene Park project will be split into 2 grant applications, each contributing to the other to reduce the contribution expenditure by the city. The grants will be built on the work currently underway at the park, including the installation of the major park entrance sign, the fabrication and installation of a large territory sign, the sculpture installations, and repatriating the old mining equipment back to the community of Likely. These 2 grants are, the grant-dependent phase of this project includes the following electrical upgrades to increase event hosting capacity, pit house with a green roof, benches and accessible picnic tables, interpretive signs and cultural monument, which includes content creation, and traditional garden beds with native perennial species. The original report, we had the city of Quesnel contributing $13,000 approximately, but now I've kind of rejigged the grant structure a little bit, so we're asking more from the Natural Infrastructure Fund, and they'll both contribute. The Natural Infrastructure Fund will contribute to NDIT, and NDIT will contribute to the Natural Infrastructure Fund. So we're kind of relying on 2 grant approvals for this project. The recommendation is that Council supports the application to Infrastructure Canada's Natural Infrastructure Fund for a grant up to $350,000 for the Lhtako Dene Park project, and that Council supports the application to Northern Development Initiative Trust Cultural Infrastructure Stream for a grant up to $300,000 for the Lhtako Dene Park project.
Thank you. Questions or comments? You want to move the motion? Councillor Rudenberg moving, seconded Councillor Vic. Questions or comments? Councillor Paul.
Yes, thank you. I'm relieved to see that, that this is just a grant application and not a commitment for taxation. However, I'm wondering if we're going to be looking at any kind of a formal agreement between the city and Lhtako Dene regarding the use of that area. And I'm thinking about maintenance, terms and conditions around different uses, preservation of the Pioneer Grove, and most importantly, what is the estimate of liability? I'm talking about financial liability that will be inherited by future councils. In the report, it's noted that a larger than expected contingency will be required due to inflation. It would be good for all of us to sort of know how much taxation has already been expended on this project. Other little bumps in the road might be the Caribou Pulp sewer outfall at the park, the boat launch, continued guaranteed access through for the public through the Riverfront Trail, any permitted uses that need to be looked at regarding the fact that Lhtako will be the new owner of the land, in a sense. And again, what will be the projected operating costs?
I'm actually going to ask the city manager to address that because I don't know what you're talking about. This isn't a transfer of land. This isn't, some kind of special rights Lhtako has. This is a project like any of our other projects where we're going to build a new amenity. So, city manager, maybe you could approach this.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. There were a lot of different questions, I guess, in that conversation from Councillor Paul. But I would draw your attention to a new form that has been developed. We've talked about it a few times, which is to give more project information when we bring projects forward to council. And some of the questions that were just asked are actually discussed in this new project form. The point of it is so that when council approves applying for a grant or approves a project, they would be able to see a broader based look at what the implications are for the city in the long run. So if you look at number 22 in that report, it says, are there any other service considerations or options to consider? And yes, garbage removal, flag washing, replacing annual cleaning of interpretive signs and monuments. So there clearly will be some requirements, and we're not saying that there isn't. We're not trying to hide it. The fact is what we're looking at right now is 2 simple grant applications, that's all. As council knows, we need to come to council to approve applying for grants. In this case, these grant applications are for 100% funding of what we're trying to do. And I have to give kudos to our grant specialists for going after a grant under a natural infrastructure fund, which we've never applied for grants under that before. So to go out and find a new grant source and apply, that's great work. We're not exactly sure how easy or hard that grant will be to get, but you got to put it out there if you expect to succeed. So with regards to the whole questions of ownership and rights of way and various competing interests on that parcel, there is a piece of work what needs to be done there in the future, but that is not anywhere related to what this project is. This project is for some of the monuments and some of the things that we're trying to achieve with Lhtako Dene Park to really turn it into a cultural asset for the city and to make it a spot where people want to stop and see the cultural impacts and what some of the history and how it relates in that area. Thank you. And again, I apologize. I don't think I answered.
No, that's fine. I think that the key, and you've indicated it, City Manager, this is a project like any of our other projects. So the questions being asked about Caribou Pulp's easement is not part of this project. It doesn't have anything to do with this project. The questions about circumscribing people's access to the park make no sense relative to this project because it's still a city park and it's still a City Riverfront Trail and so on. So I think that fear-mongering in the community that somehow we're saddling the community with something that is uber expensive and uber restrictive, I think is unfortunate. So are there other council members before I go back to Councillor Paul? Okay, and again, I want to remind council, we have approved the waterfront development plan and we've approved the Lhtako Dene cultural interpretive plan, and this is a derivative of both those plans. Councillor Paul.
And Mr. Mayor, I want to remind you that I voted in favor of the riverfront plan, and I also voted in favor of the changeover from Seal Tingley Park to Lhtako Dene. What, I guess the center of my, or a center point in my questioning is that on page 13 of 22 on the printed copy, and that has to, where it says anticipated operating costs per year. Year 1 is blank, year 2 is blank, year 3, year 4, year 5 are all blank. And I'm just wondering, why is that?
Director Bolton.
I can answer that. The Director of Public Works and I had a conversation about that. And on the next page, if you read his comments, he says he does not at this point see any increased operational costs. So because he felt what we're already doing there was pretty equivalent to what we'll be doing there with the new stuff. So that's why we left it at zeros across there.
So if I may continue then what it would have been proper to do would be to insert projected operating costs based on present operating costs so that we don't see 5 blank spaces for operating costs. That's all.
Or as a council member, read the blank spaces as there's been no cost assigned, which is the natural way to look at it. So Director Bolton.
Yeah, the intent was incremental costs and savings, so maybe we need to just change the language on the form a bit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, Councillor Elliott.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Councillor Paul, we've looked at it. I just wanted to mention after his original comments that we were on the anticipated cost. I mean, staff and bylaw, cleaning, garbage, maintenance, taking care of the beds. We do that already. So.
Yep. Any other questions or comments on this? The motion is to put in the application for a fully funded project, which would be incredible if we were able to do that. So I think it's moved and seconded already. Yeah. So all in favor? Opposed? That motion carried unanimously. And again, thank you to staff for that work. Next, BC Winter Games Society Board of Directors, Manager Reid.
Thank you. The purpose of this report is to provide council with information regarding the formation of the 2024 BC Winter Games Society. So the nominating committee has developed a list of directors to join Brian Balkwell, the president, and Brenda Beattie, the vice president, in the formation of a local BC Games Society. The society will be a nonprofit organization with volunteer directors, formed for about 18 months to plan, execute, and wrap up the games. The nominating committee included Mayor Simpson, Councillor Michelle from Lhtako Dene, Cyril Tobin from School District 28, Richard Gauthier, Kathy Somerville from the Chamber of Commerce, Charlene Lawrence, the event coordinator, and myself. Once selected as president and vice president, Brian and Brenda also joined the meetings. We met 4 or 5 times to brainstorm names for each position, and some of the members of the committee made initial conversations, reached out to the potential board members to see if they were interested, and then Brian and Brenda met with each potential director individually. The BC Games asked that the host communities councils endorse the nominated board of directors for the local BC Games Society. I won't read all of the names, but you can see the list there, and there's a list of bios attached as well. Endorsement can simply just be receipt of this report as information, and that way, if any changes do need to be made over time, the president and vice president can do that on their own without having to come back to council for further approval. Following endorsement, the next step will be a Games and Guidelines orientation session for the Board of Directors in October. And following that, the directors will begin recruiting chairs, and there'll be about 70 chairs to form those directorate teams and subcommittees, about 2,000 volunteers overall. Lhtako Dene Council has already confirmed receipt of this list. So this report is for information purposes only.
Thank you. And just a couple of quick additional comments. Manager Reid will be the city liaison to the board going forward. Manager Reid and I attended the barbecue that President Balkwell hosted as the inaugural meet and greet. This is a very strong board, very good board for our community and very committed. And the other next step when they do the orientation is I've asked them to accelerate getting us the intelligence we need for the venue upgrades that might be needed, vis-a-vis our North Caribou Rec conversation that we just had about building that into the capital plan if there are facilities, and then working with venues like Troll and Hallis Lake, et cetera, that are not ours to make sure that they're up to date, and the school board is also committed to that process. So I am following up with something that came out of that discussion with respect to Hallis Lake's biathlon range, but that's another piece. We want a good long lead time to make sure that the venues are all up to snuff as well. So, Councillor Vic.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. First, I'll say that I'll echo what you've said. The talent you've attracted with your nominating committee is profound. So based on who's involved here, I'm very hopeful we're going to pull off a phenomenal games with our partnership with Lhtako Dene. The question I have is, I guess it'd be the fourth paragraph on page 31. The BC Games asks that the host communities councils, is that us? Yeah. Endorse the nominating board. So I know this is for information only, but should we endorse this, or is that premature?
No, I think we've had quite a conversation about this. So we're basically receiving it because we have no issues with the board members. But in order to give the president and vice president flexibility that if something should happen, we don't want to go through a formal endorsement of everybody who's named to all of the positions, because then they would have to come back to us if they had to change out. And they end up becoming an independent society from us. So they have to have the flexibility to make any changes to this. So that's why we just receive it for information only. That meets the games test that we have actually looked at the board and said, yeah, we have no issues with this. And that's what Lhtako has already done. The city manager and I met with Lhtako chief and council, and we took care of that part of it. Okay. Councillor Paul.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. This is very exciting. In whatever capacity I am serving in 2024, I'm sincerely looking forward to this. I was a board member for the 82 Northern BC Winter Games and a board member for the 93 Games, and also the vice president and protocol director for 2000. So I've really got a connection here that I cherish. With regard to the fact that these games will be the first games in British Columbia's history that are co-hosted by a city and a band or a nation such as Lhtako. I'm wondering I'm sure that thought was given, but I'm kind of wondering why there isn't a director that looks after sort of the Indigenous liaison and protocols, because I think that's important. And I acknowledge that Lhtako Councillor Michel, is that how you say his name? Michel, yeah, is on the board. And I'm just wondering if thought had been given to having more of a focus towards the Indigenous part of the games.
So that's inherent in the protocol agreement we have with Lhtako. It's inherent in the fact that we put in a joint bid, and it's inherent in the fact that, like Manager Reid is the liaison, and the liaison from the school district, that Lhtako has a liaison. So we don't need to marginalize the First Nations by saying, off to the side. We also need to have that, make sure that the First Nations stuff is done. It's actually just inherent in the relationship. Now, the reason that Tim Michelle, or Councillor Michelle, as part of the ceremonies, is to make sure that the ceremonies part reflects that as well. And coupled with Charlene, whom we all know is a phenomenal organizer of events, Tim can bring that particular lens to make sure that we're reflecting the partnership and the First Nation heritage here. And then the other one is under protocol with Danny Fenton. And so making sure that the protocols that we have also include the co-hosts' protocols for greetings and prayer and so on. So we've had those discussions internal, and the board will continue those conversations.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I appreciate that explanation. Well done.
Thank you. So information only, unless there's any other questions, we can move on. And thank you, and I look forward to that continuing to evolve. Number 3, some good news.
Thank you.
Director Norburn.
Yeah. The purpose of this report is to obtain council approval to enter into a revised funding agreement with the province of British Columbia for the construction of a new childcare centre in West Quesnel, to approve awarding the construction contract for the project, and to consider allocating city funds to increase the project contingency. So in the spring of 2022, the city received confirmation that it had successfully obtained a grant for a little over $2.6 million to provide 57 new childcare spaces in Quesnel. Drawings and specifications for the project were completed, and a request for proposals to hire a general contractor for the project was issued in the spring of 2022 and closed in August. We received 3 proposals, all of which exceeded the construction budget by over $1 million. The proposals were reviewed by staff and a representative of the Quesnel Childcare Society and were scored based on the criteria outlined in the RFP package. Gen Cole Construction Limited was selected as the highest scoring proponent. Once they had been identified as the highest scoring proponent in accordance with the terms of the RFP, the city engaged with them and the design team to identify opportunities to lower the project cost by reducing project complexity and using less expensive materials where appropriate. Through that value engineering process, Gen Call Construction were able to reduce their proposal price by $430,226 to $3 million, roughly $3.2 million, a little less. A revised project budget was developed, which projected a total project cost of $3.475 million, including soft costs and contingency, resulting in a funding gap of $856,557. With the revised budget confirmed, a two-pronged approach. The mayor certainly working at a ministerial level, and staff entering into discussions with Ministry of Education and Childcare staff, started discussions about the funding gap. Yesterday, we were advised by the province that they would provide an additional $801,095 towards the project, increasing the provincial contribution to $3.42 million, which is based on sort of their maximum formula of $60,000 per childcare center space created. This contribution leaves a funding gap of approximately $55,500 based on the revised budget. The revised project budget was based on carrying a relatively modest contingency of $100,000, which is just over 3% of the construction budget. Standard contingency for a new construction project is typically 5%. Providing a sufficient contingency for the project is recommended to reduce the likelihood that there will be a need to request additional funding at a later stage in the project. Certainly not a guarantee, but it certainly reduces that likelihood. As of December 31st, 2021, the General Interest Capital Reserve had a balance of $101,718.96 that, at the discretion of council, could be allocated towards the Child Care Centre project. If the full balance of that account or that reserve were allocated toward the project, it would result in a project contingency of approximately $146,000, which would be about 4.6% of the construction budget, which is pretty close to 5%. The recommendation is that council approves entering into a revised childcare capital funding program, Childcare BC New Spaces funding agreement with the province of British Columbia based on a revised project budget of $3,475,462 and increased funding provided by the province of $3.42 million. And that council approves an allocation from the General Interest Capital Reserve of up to $101,718.96 for the Child Care Centre project, and that council approves awarding the Child Care Centre construction contract to Gencol Construction Limited for $3,187,395.
Thank you, Director Norburn. I have a mover, Councillor Elliott, seconder, Councillor Rudenberg. The topic is on the floor for discussion or questions. Councillor Paul and then Councillor Vic.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, this is pretty good that we're looking at a 90, what is it, 98% or something budget or grant for this. I do have a couple of questions. 98.4, that's pretty good. Do we have any idea how many people would be employed at this facility?
I could ask the contractor. I'm not sure, but there's,
During construction or in actual childcare?
No, when it's operating.
Yeah, I don't believe there will be any net increase relative to what we've experienced in the childcare side of things. We've had a net decrease in childcare capacity during this process. So I think while this will make up some spaces by the current provider who's going to move in here because there's extra spaces, I think from a community perspective, there's no net employment.
Okay. My second question is that because this is, I guess, a city facility as compared to what is there now, will there be any revenue sharing from fees charged back to the city?
Go ahead.
Yeah, sorry. My understanding is we'll negotiate an agreement with the Child Care Society to operate the facility. I think our intent certainly is that it be a net zero cost to the city.
Yeah, I mean, basically, we get a funded new building is what we get, and we've committed to making sure that that building is used for childcare for the next 15 years. So if we don't need it for childcare after, we've got a building that somebody else paid for that we can put to another use if we so choose.
And I would presume this is tax exempt?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Sorry, it depends on the model, right?
We're going to have to go through a process. Once we have someone leasing the building or occupying the building, then council will have to decide whether or not to give them a permissive tax exemption.
Okay. Councillor Vic.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I guess a question regarding the contingency. Obviously, our hope is that we don't need to dip into that and that it's on budget. So of that capital reserve, there'll be a remaining balance. Should, with inflation worries and everything else, what would happen in the likelihood or eventuality if inflation causes issues during construction and it would go over $101,718?
Yeah, so inflation shouldn't be a factor because it's a fixed price, right? It's a stipulated sum contract, so the contractor is bid a fixed price. Unless we change the scope of work, then there's no increase in cost. So they factored that into their bid, clearly. So it's a fixed price. So inflation shouldn't be a factor. The kinds of things that could be a factor is if the soil conditions are unexpected and that results in extra costs, or if there's thing missing in the drawing that, then requires us to address it with a change order. So, the contingency really is to cover change orders, changes in scope of work.
And the contractor involved in this is the one involved that's building the junior school. So if anybody knows what can happen with prices and supply chain, I think Gencol is very current on that. So, and again, as Director Norburn pointed out, they would have had to take all of their current experience and put it into their bid on a fixed price project, right? So, Councillor Elliott.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just to Director Bolton briefly here, we're looking at the general interest capital reserve of 101. We'd be taking that down and eliminating it. I'm assuming that doesn't leave us with any kind of vulnerability. That's what this fund is there for.
Yeah, that reserve is just, it comes from whenever we get a surplus payout from the MFA related to our debt, or we have interest that accrues that isn't related to a reserve, so it just kind of accumulates over time. Every few years, we tend to spend it on our projects. The last one was the Forestry Innovation Center. We spent a chunk of it on it, so we're good. Yeah.
It's Director Bolton's little slush fund, but we won't say that publicly. Councillor Runge.
Yes, thank you. And I think at the end of the day, we really have to remember that this slush fund is actually going into a project that's really, really good for our community. Like, you know, if we're putting in $100,000 for a $3 million building, I think we have to always sit back and think, even if we happen to, in the unlikely event, as people are alluding to, go over by $50,000, I'd still say it's $50,000 well spent.
Yeah, I would absolutely echo that, Councillor Runge, and I actually, it was one of the meetings I didn't report out on, but I met with staff as well for this project down in UBCM, and we were sort of pushing them to make a decision before September 30th because we were afraid that Gen Call would walk away because they couldn't hang on for that long on a fixed price in that situation, and we had already seen it go from 1.5 million to 2.5 million because the province had to do a reset and go back through a process again. So we were fortunate that the child care responsibilities flipped to the Ministry of Education during this process because the Ministry of Children and Family Development had never done capital projects before. And that was the issue of them having to then go back and do a reset and resubmit for projects and so on, whereas the Ministry of Education have a capital team. And what we were saying is, look, you have a whole bunch of projects that aren't going to go. So you have money that's allocated for these, just assign the money to the ones that are going to go, but do it fast. So it was great that they were able to deliver before the September 30 deadline that we gave to them. But to your point, for $100,000 on a $3.5 million project, it's gravy. But the other piece of this is vital for our recruitment and retention workforce, as well. So I think we're going to need to contemplate more of these kinds of projects to make sure that we keep our economy ticking along with the workforce we need to. So, any other questions or comments on the motion? All those in favor? Any in opposition? That motion passed unanimously. Thanks, everybody, and thanks, Director Norbert. I know you were watching this on your vacation and making sure you stayed plugged into it, so that's much appreciated. Next, Municipal Finance Authority Equipment Financing, Director Bolton.
Thank you. So the purpose of this report is to request a resolution from Council to approve the equipment financing through the Municipal Finance Authority for the equipment in the 2022 capital plan that were to be financed. So as part of the capital plan, Council approved the purchase of $860,000 of mobile equipment as required by the city's fleet replacement, and also 3 additional trucks for a total of $995,000. And as per the capital plan, $670,000 of the mobile equipment was to be funded using the MFA equipment financing program. At this point, only $650,000 is expected to be spent on equipment, as one garbage truck was mistakenly included in this year's fleet plan that is not required until 2026. Of that $650,000, $320,000 is required to be funded through the MFA equipment financing program. So the recommendation is that Council of the City of Quesnel authorizes up to $320,000 be borrowed under Section 175 of the Community Charter for the Municipal Finance Authority for the purpose of purchasing mobile equipment in 2022, and that loan be repaid within 5 years with no rights of renewal.
Can I have a motion, please? Councillor Elliott, so moved. Councillor Vic, second. Questions or comments? Councillor Paul?
Yeah, thank you. Unfortunately, I have to vote against this one because I voted against the new hires, and I can, like, we've got $135,000 here for I don't know how many new trucks for these new hires, and so I'll be voting against.
And Councillor Paul, I do want to remind you that you voted in favor of the overall equipment plan. All this is the requirement for the borrowing to initiate that plan. So this is a pro forma required by law because we're borrowing, but the actual plan itself is approved by council. So just so you're aware of that. Okay, so on the motion, any other questions or comments? All in favor? In opposition? That motion passed with one dissenting vote. Okay. Next, our planning technician, and I noticed that, Lyndon, you made sure your nameplate was changed out and everything else as well, so. Please go ahead and lead us through the next report on floodplain management.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The purpose of this report is to provide council with a summary of the public consultation that was completed for the new floodplain management bylaw. Just as a quick background, the June 21st, 2022 council meeting, staff introduced the newly drafted floodplain management bylaw number 1922, which would replace floodplain management bylaw number 1187 of 1991, with significant changes to floodplain mapping, regulation exemptions, the Baker Creek floodplain specifications, so significant changes there. At the July 26, 2022 council meeting, council directed staff to conduct additional public consultation, which is to be summarized in today's meeting. Public consultation activities included a web page with relevant floodplain bylaw information, 2 newspaper ads in the Caribou Observer, 2 standard social media posts, 1 council highlights post, and 1 boosted social media ad running from September 12th to September 19th. That reached approximately 3,282 people. As of the writing of this report, no comments from the public have been received. So the recommendation is that council receives for consideration the following consultation report, and that council provides third reading of the City of Quesnel Floodplain Management Bylaw number 1922 and the bylaw section of the council agenda.
Thank you. And so again, we will deal with the bylaw in the bylaw section, but with respect to the public consultation, any questions or comments? Councillor Paul?
Yeah, thank you. Question to staff. It's abundantly obvious that the floodplain mapping is developed in response to flooding or potential flooding from Fraser River, Quesnel River, and Baker Creek. But why is there no recognition of flooding from Dragon Creek? The back end of my property and adjoining properties has flooded twice this season, and the flooding occurs every time they open the floodgates on the Dragon Lake.
You mean we open?
Pardon me?
We open.
That's right.
Yeah, because it's the city that controls that.
Yes, I thank you, Councillor Paul. So yeah, for that, the bylaw does put regulation for Dragon Creek, so there is a regulation around that. It's just not specifically mapped out. Rather, it's based on a natural boundary. So for Dragon Creek, for example, you'd have to stay back 15 meters from that creek, from the high water mark, as well as 1.5 meters up, rather than it being mapped out where that floodplain is. So it's a little bit different. It's more of relative rather than engineers going to map out that floodplain.
But correct me if I'm wrong, part of it is the floodplain mapping is for those natural areas that are subjected to the waxing and waning of nature, whereas Dragon Creek is actually an engineered situation. Is that one of the reasons we don't map it out?
Not necessarily. It would be more about funding and the reliability of data that you get from what's the actual word for it? Hydrometers. So just for that, and engaging the levels of the river. I assume it's because of that.
Okay, Councillor Paul.
Yeah, I think it should be reflected somehow to show that flooding is an annual situation in that area. And I know that Dragon Creek is shown on the floodplain mapping to be in the floodplain, but that's from water coming back from the Quesnel River. So, and it basically has a stop line. But I think that there should be some recognition of the fact that Dragon Creek is also subject to flooding.
Okay, so noted. Yeah. Councillor, Director Coben, did you want to make a comment?
Well, I just could speak somewhat to Dragon Creek and Lake Planning Technician Hunter talked about is the restrictions around building within the high water mark. With reference to Dragon Creek and the Dragon Lake Dam, there has been dam inundation studies completed. We undergo a dam safety review every 5 years, so there is in separate reports, those water levels are accounted for.
Thank you. Okay. So we don't receive reports, just as for future reference, the way that we operate on our agenda, reports are naturally received if we accept the agenda. So we'll just deal with the bylaw and the bylaw section. So thank you for your work on that and your presentation tonight. Okay. Next, do you have your nameplate too? Good. Just make sure we get it switched out for the cameras, you know.
No pressure.
Nobody's watching. Nobody You got it.
Lyndon figured it out, just saying. That's good. It's up now. It's all right, Melissa. Thank you. Sorry for picking on you. It's just levity at our 2-hour mark here. So go ahead and deliver your report, please.
Thank you. So the purpose of this report is for a development permit application. They are requesting to increase the number of signs permitted along the building frontage and increase the total sign area at 225 Saint Laurent, which is Shoppers Drug Mart.
And Melissa, we have the big picture. So Councillor, you've got the big picture on your desk in color if you want.
Perfect. So the applicant wishes to display 2 additional wall signs and increase the sign area along the southern business frontage of Shoppers Drug Mart. As such, the applicant must vary table 2.1.3A of the sign bylaw. This bylaw regulates the number of signs and the size in the downtown district. So the maximum number of signs permitted is currently 2, and as well as the maximum sign area for all awning, wall, or window signs combined would be 6 meters squared. So the applicant is requesting 2 additional signs, and as well as requesting to increase the total signage area to 17.2 meters. Shoppers Drug Mart has a much larger business frontage than other local businesses. The increase of overall sign area would have less of an effect on the streetscape. As well, removing the awning will provide an updated look to the building, which staff recommends the approval of the variance. Just moving to the recommendations. The recommendation is that Council vary Table 2.1.3A of the sign bylaw number 1852, 2018 to allow 2 additional signs along the business frontage and increase the sign area to 17.2 meters squared on Lot 1 and 16, Block 17, Town of Quesnel, Plan 17,000.
Thank you. On the recommendation, Councillor Vicks will move, Councillor Rudenberg second. Questions or comments? Seeing none, all those in favor? Any opposed? Carried. Easy peasy. Thank you. Okay. Next, Manager Reid on UBCM Volunteer and Composite Fire Department Training and Equipment Grant.
Thank you. The purpose of this report is to get Council's approval to submit an application to UBCM's Community Emergency Preparedness Fund grant. So this grant is currently available for up to $30,000 to cover the cost of one of the eligible expenses is the cost of PPE. And so the proposed project would include coveralls, safety helmets, safety visors, and project administration. The equipment would be used in wildland-urban interface fires for the fire department. The recommendation is that Quesnel City Council support the application to UBCM's Community Emergency Preparedness Fund for up to $30,000 for the volunteer and composite fire department training and equipment.
Councillor Runge, so moved. Councillor Rudenberg, second. Questions or comments from council? Seeing none, all in favor? Any opposed? Carried. Thank you, Manager Reid. Next one, it's grant heaven tonight. Director Coben.
Thank you, Mayor. The purpose is to seek approval to apply for a grant application to the British Columbia's Ministry of Transportation and Infrastructure Active Transportation Infrastructure Grant for the construction of an accessible trail connecting the Riverfront Trail to the downtown core at St. Laurent Avenue with a total project cost of $710,000. The existing trail connecting front to the Riverfront Trail is steep, very narrow, rough. It's falling over in need of replacement. This link would provide accessibility in both directions, south towards the footbridge, leading towards West Quesnel, and then also tie in back to head north to the hospital and beyond, which would enable users to avoid the alternative of narrower sidewalks on Highway 97 at Front Street, while also avoiding a busier intersection crossing. Should this application be successful, the province provides cost share funding of up to $500,000 at 70% of eligible funding. This project has been previously identified and is in the 5-year capital plan. The benefits of the project is a multi-use path would be accessible, give improved riverfront access, follow the BC Active Transportation Design Guide, and improve grades, widths, and basically overall safety of users to the trail system. The recommendation is that Council approves submitting a grant application for $710,000 for the Connecting Downtown to the Riverfront Trail Active Transportation Project to the British Columbia Active Transportation Grant, and that upon successful grant application, Council approves the remaining funding of $213,000 to come from gas tax funds.
Councillor Elliott, so moved. Councillor Runge, second. Questions or comments? Councillor Paul.
Yeah, thank you for the report. I'm presuming that because we're spending or applying for this much money, the grade of the slope is going to be reduced significantly. I can remember taking my dear old dad down there in a wheelchair, and he just about suffered a premature demise because I couldn't hold him back. But I'm hoping that.
Councillor Paul, while your story is interesting, if you actually read the background, and Director Coben noted it. So on the report, page 48, background, it says it will facilitate improved riverfront access, follow the BC Active Transportation Design Guide while improving grades, widths, and overall safety. Your question is already answered in the report.
Thank you.
Okay, any other questions that are not in the report? Seeing none, we have the motion on the floor. All in favor? Any opposed? Carried unanimously. Okay. Oh my goodness, another grant? Director Norburn.
Nope. Reid.
Oh, Director Reid, sorry.
Good.
I thought, it was a natural. Director Reid.
Manager Reid, thank you.
Not corrected yet.
The purpose of this report is to get Council's approval to submit an application to NDIT for the Recreation Infrastructure Funding Program for the arena flooring and storage trailer. This is exactly the same report that came to the Joint Advisory Committee last week. We just need the local government where the equipment is going to approve the application. So can I skip to the recommendation? Okay. So the recommendation is that Quesnel City Council supports the application to Northern Development Initiative Trust Recreation Infrastructure Funding Program for arena flooring and a storage trailer.
Councillor Runge, so moved. Councillor Rudenberg by head nod, second. Any other questions or comments? Councillor Elliott.
Just a quick comment, as you mentioned, another grant application. Just kudos to staff. I just was recalling when we had the municipal auditor in here, whatever the official title was, and it came back quite glowing for the municipality. But one of the highlights was the amount of grants that this city receives as compared to other municipalities. I've never seen anything like it. So it really goes to the hard work of staff that we can even apply for things like this.
Thank you. Any other comments or questions? I would like to add one, and it has to do with comments that Councillor Elliott just made. It's along that same vein. I think as a council, we need to get better at educating the public about how grant funding works, because I can guarantee you that some of our wonderful social media armchair generals are going to be saying if you add this all up tonight, it's around $5 million and it should go to the Johnson Bridge. And I think we have an obligation as council members to educate the public that that's not how grants work. When the government offers a grant for a childcare facility, you can't take that money and put it to a bridge. You actually have to put it to a childcare facility. When you get a fire-related grant, it has to actually go to the fire-related equipment that you put it in for. And then a lot of grants that we chase are very specific grants that we do a lot of work on to make a decision as to what goes in. So the active transportation one, for example, we've got lots of different active transportation projects, but we operate off of a strategic plan, and we have in this case, the waterfront plan, and so we make those decisions. But that idea that some members of the public have that somehow these grants come unpinned and that we can just, collate the grants and then go and get something else done, I think we've got an obligation to try and really educate them that that's just not how it works, and that what we've done here, especially if we get things like the Riverfront Trail, the cultural interpretive area in Lhtako Dene Park and some of these other grants, childcare facility, this really is stretching tax dollars in a big way. The other piece is that there's only one taxpayer. You get that as well. And my response to that is, okay, would you like other taxpayers to get those grant monies in their community, or would you prefer that your tax money comes back to our community? So those are the two bits of noise that I hear. We take it as, oh my God, we're getting this grant money, isn't it great? But some members of the community don't understand it the same way, and I think we should be a bit more proactive in educating them as to how this works. So, Councillor Rudenberg.
Thank you. And the only piece I'd add to that is that we've gotten a whole lot better at the type of grants that we do go after. We no longer get a grant and then try and make a program work. We actually have that 5-year vision where we know what we need and we apply to grants that work within what we want to have happen. Because I've seen in the past, millennial ago, where we go, oh my God, there's a $100,000 grant. Great. We got it. Okay, now what do we do? How do we make it work for our community? So we've gotten 1,000 times better on how we make sure that we use the grants according to the plans that we have for the community.
On that, then, with respect to this particular grant, on the motion, all in favor? Any in opposition? That motion passed unanimously. Thank you, Manager Reid, for that report. Okay, and then the next, the Director Bolton property tax write-off.
So the purpose of this report is to request approval to write off property taxes for a mobile home that no longer exists. In order to write off any property taxes, council must approve by resolution, and the resolution must be sent to the ministry for final approval. So it's very rare that this happens. This is the first time for me and all the time I've been here. But one issue faced by many municipalities is dilapidated mobile homes located in mobile parks where they don't own the land as well. So municipalities are reluctant to tax sell these mobile homes because they usually end up being the purchaser and then have to deal with the costs of disposing of the mobile home. So best practices that have come over the last few years around these mobile homes is to put liens on them rather than tax sell them. So the city's going to be doing this on all future mobile homes that have delinquent taxes. So the property currently in question has not had any payment made on the property since 2009. I've included a background document that shows all the ways we tried to find, we were not able to find the owners and all the work that we did. So no further taxes are accruing. It's just the interest on the old charges that are sitting there that we need to get written off. So the recommendation is that council approve that all property taxes, currently $8,080.87, related to 10-2189 Gasshoff Road, Folio 470, 8100, 103, be written off as uncollectible.
Councillor Runge, Councillor Rudenberg, second. Questions or comments? Seeing none on the motion, all those in favor? Any opposed? Carried. Thank you. Okay, you have SIP, you have the two items in front of you. With respect to the Legion 1, staff is very much aware of that as an ongoing project and is aware of their desire to see, grants and various other things. So this is notification of one of their fundraising efforts, and the same with Big Brothers Big Sisters. So any questions or comments on the two items? Okay, seeing none. Then bylaw 1922, City of Quesnel Floodplain Management Bylaw, third reading. Councillor Elliott, so moved. Councillor Vick, second. Questions or comments? All those in favor? Any opposed? That motion carried unanimously. No changes to upcoming meeting schedule in this year anyway. We'll see what happens. And no changes to committee appointments. Announcements, future events.
I apologize, there was one change to the meeting schedule that I forgot to add. The October 18th meeting was rescheduled to October 25th.
Okay, thank you. So, and a calendar reminder's gone out to council on that one. Thank you. Okay, any announcements, future events? Did you have a, go ahead.
Just vote.
Okay, vote. Yeah, and go on to the city website. It has all the voting opportunities there. So, any gallery questions? Seeing none, I would invite a motion to adjourn. Councillor Vick, so moved. Councillor Runge, second. All in favor? Any opposed? Thank you, staff, and thank you, council.